Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Our largest single-theme land expansion ever.
Now we want you to share with us our latest and greatest dream.
Matterhorn Matt presents Matterhorn Mondays.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 157 of Matterhorn Mondays, coming to you all live from the Outpost. Of course, I'm your host, Matterhorn Matt.
And I am Jeremy.
And today we are joined...
Freddy.
Sorry, Freddy. We interrupted there, but yeah, we're joined once again by a very special guest and the host of the podcast Imagine Tomorrow, Freddy. Glad to have you back, Freddy. Welcome back. Hope you're in for quite the discussion today.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just so much to talk about. Are you guys ready?
I think I'm ready. I hope I'm ready.
Yeah, you know.
Well, I guess before we move on,
I'm the
Freddy,
type of person that needs to be pushed into the pool, but yeah.
That's true. That's true. That's fair. Me too, actually. But Freddy, before we get started here, why don't you go ahead and take a few minutes or so just to go ahead and tell the audience what kind of work you do here.
Hi, I'm from Imagine Tomorrow, a podcast where the future meets themed entertainment. So we have a lot of things in common with Matterhorn Matt Mondays and talking about all of these different things. And it's really cool when we get to meet up together. It's kind of like the Avengers, you know? We just all meet together and conquer this challenge once and for all. I mean, I did a recap of all the news up on my channel, which you can find on any podcast network. I love to have Imagineers on and have conversations about the future of themed entertainment, but also just depictions of the future in general. A fun one coming up is the Marvel theme park universe, which is really going to bust wide open with Avengers Campus at California Adventure. So kind of leading up to that, we're just getting everybody hyped, getting everybody excited for all of the new offerings, but we're also covering the history of Marvel theme park representation.
Nice.
So I'm really excited for that conversation. It's just a good time over there. You know, go and listen to some really fun creatives and some really fun commentators on a variety of different subjects. Most recently, I had Alex the Historian, who you might have heard of, on the podcast to talk about the future of transportation at the Disneyland Resort. So it was a really fun conversation about our personal connections to the monorail and the People Mover and what that's going to look like in the future.
All right.
Yeah, that's great. He's been highlighting a lot of interesting things on Twitter, so yeah, that'll be cool.
Link, of course, will be down in the description for Freddy's podcast, Imagine Tomorrow, and, of course, Freddy's Twitter as well. And, yeah, I guess before we move on here, links to our social media will, of course, be down in the description as always. And if you'd like to be wished a happy birthday live on the stream, you can do so by clicking the link down below, submitting your name in the Google form, and we will add it to our birthday calendar. And let's see, it looks like this week we have 3 birthdays. This past Sunday, the 13th, was Caleb's birthday. Happy birthday to Caleb. This upcoming Thursday, the 17th, is Gail's birthday. Happy birthday to Gail. And finally, Friday, the 18th, we have Thora's birthday. Happy birthday to all 3 of you. Matterhorn Mondays, Mountaineers, listeners. I feel like a weatherman reading off, like, weather at like different cities or something whenever I do that. But link, of course, down below if you'd like to submit your birthday. And, of course, 575-386-5814. Call in, leave your voicemail if you'd like to, if you have any thoughts on the topics we're discussing. Maybe you have some thoughts on the new Loki series that we're going to be talking about later on. Whatever you guys want. And, of course, we do, ask to limit the voicemails to at least under a minute as best as you can. And, again, that is 575-386-5814. Now, of course, I'm sure you guys are very excited to hear us talk about all the announcements. But before we get into that this week, it is, of course, time for this week's segment of Matt Snaps.
A whole wide world of knowledge awaits underneath the cap. It's once again time this week for Matterhorn Matt Snaps.
Wow. Look at this Snapple Apple. Oh, I grabbed the wrong... Wait, is this... I think I might have grabbed the wrong one from my fridge. I think this one's already opened. Hold on. This is the wrong one. I'll be back. in under
Oh
a
my
second.
goodness.
In under a second. You guys will see how fast it'll take me to get the other one.
Okay.
Look at the amount of Cardinals merchandise in there. Wow. Wow, he was back
Two
quick.
Snapples.
I told you guys it'd be fast. This is Fruit Punch. I couldn't hear what Jeremy was saying. I saw his mouth move, but I hope he didn't say any mean things about me, guys, in chat. If he did, let me know.
Never.
Okay.
But this is, of course, the Fruit Punch Snapple flavor. I think I opened this one 2 or 3 episodes ago. I don't remember. Either way, we're going to pop this open. I'm thirsty for some Snapple and some sugar, so let's go ahead and open this here. Whoa! That was a really good snap. I'm proud of that one. I haven't read the fact in a few weeks. This is real fact number 333. Long Island is the largest island in the continental U.S. If it'll focus. I guess I trust Snapple.
There we go.
Yeah, unless we have any historians or geography people in the chat, I trust Snapple that that fact is correct. But yeah, that does it for this week's Matt Snaps, and it is of course time to move on to this week's news from the Peak.
We now present to you news from the Peak.
Well. News from the Peak. First bit of news. Disney gives update for the Flamingo Crossings Town Center. Now, earlier today, Disney announced major updates to its Flamingo Crossings Town Center project in Central Florida. The updates include new concept art as well as new retailers set to move in. And these new tenants include Wendy's, Five Below, Domino's, Ellie Lou's Brews. Oh, wow, that's a cool name. Ellie Lou's Brews. Ellie Lou's Brews and Barbecue. That wasn't the end of the name. There's even more to it. Firehouse Sub and many more restaurants here. In the statement, Disney said, quote, these brands will join the stellar lineup of previously announced shops and restaurants, including Target, which will serve as their primary anchor, PDQ, Five Guys, Ben & Jerry's, and Dunkin'. Walgreens is also currently under construction on an out parcel. Unquote. Flamingo Crossings will also include many hotels and a wide range of other shops and restaurants. No timeline was given for the completion, but the Target is slated to open sometime this year. Everybody loves Target. Target's a quality store, I think. But Jeremy, what do we have here for our second bit of news from the Peak?
Yeah, well, you know who else loves Target is Bob Chapek.
Yes.
So their second bit of news from the Peak. Epcot's Voices of Liberty to give virtual concert. A staple of the American Pavilion at Epcot's World Showcase, the Voices of Liberty will be performing a virtual holiday concert live from the America Gardens Theater this Tuesday at 6:10 p.m. I think it's Eastern Standard Time, I would assume so. The concert will be available through the Disney Parks blog website and will not be available to rewatch after. One and done. The Voices of Liberty is a longtime vocal group who have entertained guests with classic American folk songs since the park's opening in 1982. With the devastating blows to live entertainment in the parks over the past several months and even years, it's good to see that they are still somewhat going strong. I think that's kind of good news. I love the Voices of Liberty. I think they're great. I think they're a great example of live entertainment that, really feels integrated into what the park is about, what the area is supposed to communicate. So, yeah, they've been going strong since 1982, and I sure hope they come out the other side of the pandemic and they're still in the parks.
Yeah.
So this will be nice.
Yeah, I guess we can have the link in the description for this stream. Once the link eventually goes live, we'll update the podcast so you guys can go ahead and watch along. And it looks like for our final bit of news from the Peak, this is very exciting news. Barge has been added to the World Showcase Lagoon for the brand new Harmonious show. Something new sailed into Epcot's World Showcase Lagoon this past week, a giant barge to be used for Disney's new nighttime spectacular, Harmonious. This is the first and smallest of 5 barges that will permanently rest in the center of the lagoon as the main infrastructure for the new show, as you can see in this beautiful image captured by Blog Mickey. When not launching fireworks, lasers, and projections at night, these large structures will serve as fountains during the day. Many criticize the barge as being a giant eyesore, especially for sitting at such a central focal point in the park, with 4 more barges, or larger barges, on the way. That's kind of a tongue twister. Larger barges, kind of, on the way.
Sorry.
These criticisms, these criticisms may continue and has many wondering if the daytime water feature will be enough to mask these new imposing permanent additions to the World Showcase Lagoon. Yeah, these things are huge if you look, and like we mentioned, this is only the smallest of. You can only imagine how big all the other ones will look. Very interesting. I'm sure, hopefully, Disney will find a way to mask it during the day. You know, fountains are always nice. Hopefully, they do a good job. But I think that is going to wrap up this week's news from the Peak, and we do have a lot of news to get to this week. We're very excited to talk about everything. Mr. Jeremy, what do we have coming up for today's in store for today's show?
Big show coming up. We're going to be discussing all that exciting stuff from this past week. First, we're going to really break down the content. New content galore. We'll walk through all the major announcements from last week, and we'll share what we're most excited for. There's not much to report by way of Disney-related COVID news, so hey, you guys can cheer. There's no COVID rundown today. But after that, we will dive deeper into what this Investor Day represents in the company's history and what Disney may look like in the 2020s. Has the Chapek era officially begun? Stay tuned to find out what we think. All of that up ahead. But first,
it's time.
We have a question of the day. So let's see here.
We have a few good questions that have been submitted, I think.
We have a few good questions here. I realize that we don't know who sent these. Well, you know what? It's a newer segment, so we're trying to figure it out. I'm going to go with this question, though, and I think Matt will find this a good question for it. We don't know who sent it, so if you're in the chat right now, let us know if this is you. We're going to go with whoever sent this. Here's the question. What's your favorite concept art for a Disney attraction? We may have to take time to think. I realized as I said that question out loud. But whoever sent that was a good question. Those are the kind of questions we love to receive. Does anyone want to start right off the bat?
I can start right
Freddy,
off
do you
the
have
bat.
a go-to
I know
answer?
exactly.
Let's go.
So there's a piece of concept art that was done for Disneyland's version of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. And then they printed it out in this massive sort of poster form and put it up on the construction wall for the Frontierland entrance. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, that was sort of your in-park teaser of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, was this massive piece of concept art that illustrated the land. It even had the old Imperial shuttle where the new First Order one was going to be. And so it had like these little things that in the end are different. And so you can tell that this is earlier concept art and everything else, but it still gave you that impression of how big it truly was going to be. And that in combination with Riding Thunder Mountain and everything else really just built the hype for that land. Well, later on when everything had opened and they had taken that big piece of artwork, it had been moved into the offices of Galaxy's Edge. And so it still hangs in there. And that's one of those things, if I would walk by it, and you would always be reminded of the excitement and the energy around the opening of the land.
Nice. That's a great answer, Freddy. Yeah, I remember seeing that poster up before the land opened, like you mentioned. I kind of... Jeremy, do you want to go next, or do you want me to go next?
Yeah, okay. I'm actually sending you the art I've selected for today, and if you can put it in for people to see. So I just kind of chose something that just came into my mind right now. I have so many great pieces of concept art. There's possibly no greater concept artist than Herb Ryman when it comes to the parks. He's able to capture not just how something is going to look working with the design teams, but he's able to somehow capture everything else involved, what you feel and the ideas being communicated, and he adds a sort of artistic poetry to it. So it's less about how it's going to look and more about what it means. So I've selected one that I think really embodies this. They all do, but Herb Ryman did some concept art for the American Adventure, and this is a piece of that. I guess in an original concept, there was going to be more more of a Tom Sawyer-ish reference, or Huckleberry Finn reference, actually, more specifically, I guess, as their way to tackle slavery, which would have been interesting, probably. But I love this piece of concept art. You see what I mean? It doesn't just capture how something should necessarily literally look in the space. It captures the ideas that are being communicated. I think it's just, it's brilliant. That's how you do concept art in my mind. There's many ways to do it, but there's just been no greater concept artist to me than Herb Ryman. I mean, look at that. Look at that. Beautiful.
That is a pretty nice piece of artwork, and I always get very sad when I see nice pieces of concept art like that, because I can't draw that well, and I wish I could paint my own pieces like that, but sadly I can't. Now, this is a great question. Emmy said, this is a question from Emmy, as she pointed out in chat. Yeah.
Hey, 2 in a row. 2 weeks in a row.
2 weeks in a row, yeah. Shout out to Emmy for this great question. Yeah, this is kind of a tough one to come up off the top of my head. I'm going to sort of steal one from Mark, who put one in chat, the Westcott pieces of concept art that were drawn up for that.
Oh, yeah, great.
Yeah, those are great pieces of work. Yeah, I wish we had more time to prepare for this question. I would have thought of something better, but that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, shout out to Emmy for the great question. And I think, Jeremy, does that wrap up this week's question of the day?
I think it does. And, that should be its own segment, just like look at a random concept art and admire it. But anyway, we'll consider that. Maybe this segment will help us find other segments to put in here. Anyway.
Exactly. Look into the future. But yeah, we do have, like we mentioned, a lot of great topics that we're excited to get into. Our first topic of the day is going to be, of course, Disney announces the ambitious slate of new projects on their Investor Day event. Now, this past December 10th marked Disney's annual Investor Day, and of course, due to COVID, this year's 4-hour-long event was presented virtually. But that wasn't the only difference. Investor Day 2020 just so happened to be the most highly anticipated Investor Day in years. With Warner Media's recent 2020 ambitions announced the week prior, fans and the general public, of course, were expecting Disney to respond with an even more ambitious slate of projects. Many fans would agree that Disney certainly delivered on this front, announcing 52 new major projects to be spread out across their direct-to-consumer platforms for 2021 and beyond. We'll dive more into that and what that means a little later, but first, let's break down some of these major announcements, and let's go ahead and start with everybody's favorite. I guess you could say everybody's favorite, Marvel Studios. Of course, a new WandaVision trailer was revealed ahead of its January 15th release. A trailer for Falcon and the Winter Soldier was also released with a premiere date of March 2021. We got an exclusive look at the Loki show, with a slated release in May 2021. Hawkeye Series will come out in the fall of 2021, and they will also be producing the animated series called What If? That'll be coming out later that year as well. And it was also announced that 3 new Marvel series are currently under development for Disney Plus, including Ironheart, Armor Wars, and this is a kind of big one, Secret Invasion. That's one I'm excited to talk about. Kevin Feige announced casting updates for Moon Knight, She-Hulk, and Ms. Marvel, and it is also announced that there will be a Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special for 2022, following the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, or followed by Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 in 2023. In terms of big movies, Kevin Feige announced that King T'Challa will not be recast after Chadwick Boseman's passing, but Black Panther 2 is still slated to come out July 2022. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is in development as well, and this is great news, as well as a Fantastic Four movie. Feige also confirmed that the future of the MCU will explore the multiverse and that Doctor Strange will tie in both to WandaVision and the future Spider-Man 3 film that will be coming out, I believe, in 2022. I can't remember right off the top of my head for that one, but I noticed my camera's been frozen. That's awkward. Well, let's go ahead and take a pause right there and recap all of this Marvel news. Let's go ahead and start with Freddy. Freddy, I'm not quite sure. Oh, sorry. I'm not.
You're good. You're good.
I'm not quite sure where you stand when it comes to being like a Marvel fan. So, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Oh, okay, he's wearing an Avengers jacket. Never mind then.
Avengers
That answers my
Campus
question.
hoodie. Yes, Avengers Campus.
That answers my question.
I'm doing an Avengers Campus thing on my show. Like, come on.
That's right.
Get with the program, Matt. Come on.
Come on, Matt. But when it comes to Marvel, while some of this stuff was new, a lot of it had already been put in place from previous announcements, from the previous D23 in 2019. So it was kind of just readjusting our expectations and how these movies are going to flow together and connect. Because some things, when they announce these movies, you're not necessarily sure how does this movie play into that movie. Well, with this slate and after the Investors Day, it's pretty clear how a lot of these things are going to combine together. For the longest time, we've been building up to Endgame, so it's kind of like, what do you do next? Like, where do you go? And it seems like they're sectioning off parts of the MCU to coexist and co-interact as they build up to their own conclusions, their own ends of stories. They're building up. So in the case of the WandaVision show, that sets up the events that will lead into the new Spider-Man film, whatever they're going to call it, Spider-Verse or who knows, into the new Spider-Man film, and then into Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So those three films, they're in a line there that leads you all the way through to 2022 is when that comes out, the Doctor Strange film. Likewise, you have sort of the Falcon Winter Soldier film taking place in sort of it's post the Black Widow film, but in some ways they're filling in that sort of spy Winter Soldier area of the MCU, sort of the gritty, realistic side. And so both of those I expect to see connections. Those are also going to connect to the Hawkeye show that's in development as well. But there's just so much to talk about. I mean, I'm really, personally, the thing I'm most excited about is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Nice. Because
Kang the freaking Conqueror is coming, and he is my favorite MCU or Marvel villain. I can't wait to see him in the MCU. And I forget the name of the actor. Jonathan Majors, I believe, is his name. And he was in the Lovecraft Country series for HBO, and that was really well done, and I can't wait to see the way that he portrays Kang the Conqueror. I think he's personally sympathetic as a villain, and it's very interesting to see how he's going to interact with everything that's happening in the MCU, because normally it's like something that the Avengers have done has led to Kang's arrival in the present. Somehow you messed with the timeline, here comes Kang the Conqueror to restore everything back to its rightful place. So I'm very excited for how that plays into things. I also think that it might tie into the Fantastic Four. We'll see how everything works out there. For a while, Peyton Reed of the Ant-Man franchise was supposed to direct Fantastic Four, and he even hinted as much. But moving in the direction of Watts, it seems like they're going to move more out of the Spider-Man segment than out of the Ant-Man segment, which I think is an interesting choice. In fact, they might kind of join together, so they might be having sort of Spider-Man elements mixed in with the Ant-Man elements as they begin the Fantastic Four as sort of the follow-up to both of those franchises. In terms of his direction and the way that the Fantastic Four has kind of been teased in the past, in Spider-Man Far From Home, you might have noticed that there was a new building in the place of Avengers Tower.
Yes.
For a while, we were trying to figure out who were the tenants of this building, what was going on, and at this point, I think we can all assume that it is the Baxter building from Marvel Comics. There's even a sign on the side of some of the construction fencing that says, we can't wait to show you what comes next. And it says 1, 2, 3 ? Yeah. Which everyone assumed was just a teaser for Phase 4, but it could also be a teaser for Fantastic Four. So we'll see how everything connects there, but I'm just really excited for the future, and it's just the continuation of what Kevin Feige has been doing for the past 10 years. So this franchise just keeps on going. It does not stop.
Yeah.
Now that Avengers Campus and all these other attractions start popping up, you start to see the theme parks play into that as well. And it's just really exciting to see a bright future. And you have Taika Waititi and you have these other directors coming in, giving their own spin on the franchise. So, yes, there's a Marvel formula, but you're also seeing people have fun with it.
Yeah. Before I move on to Jeremy here, I'd like to sort of touch on something Freddy kind of touched on. We haven't seen a Marvel movie in almost. When was the last Marvel movie that came out? Was it Spider-Man and the Spider-Man Far From Home?
It was
So it's
Spider-Man Far From
been-
Home, and that's going to be a year ago. So we haven't had a Marvel film, or that, all the Disney Plus shows got
Yeah.
pushed back, and so we haven't had anything for almost a year now. So it's one of those things that it's good that we have this drought, because
Yeah.
otherwise people were starting to get that, what they called Marvel fatigue of just every single month there's something and it keeps going. And so now we've had this year-long period of time where there wasn't even a lot of news.
Yeah.
Sort of everything's on hold. So everybody's holding their breath, they're waiting, and all of a sudden you're going to be thrust right back into the MCU, and all of these things are happening all over the place. And I'm really excited for it. It's now we can start building to things beyond Thanos, Galactus, Kang the Conqueror,
Yes.
whatever, you want. But the universe is broken open after Endgame, and there's so many different areas of the MCU to play in, different genres even. Like Loki, that trailer, like it's this mystery thriller, like what is going on? So it's really exciting to see them break out and do different things creatively. That's just part of where Disney's taking all of their franchises. They're experimenting, and it's really fun to see.
I agree. Mr. Jeremy, what are your thoughts here on all these Marvel announcements?
Yeah, I'm not I'm definitely not as big of a Marvel fanatic as Freddy is, so I'm not going to say anything insightful really. But I enjoyed that decade, that Marvel decade. That's really what the 2010s were. I enjoyed those films a lot. They were a great time. Definitely was a big deal. There's nothing done like that ever in terms of blockbusters, in terms of franchises. So that was a pretty monumental thing. They were a lot of fun, a wild ride. I agree. It is being cracked open, and it's all going in all these different directions. And that is a really exciting thing. However, I do think it is going to become more of a niche department. There's a lot of people involved with it, a lot of people who love it. But like the casual Marvel MCU enjoyer like me, there are a couple that I'll check out. I think WandaVision looks interesting. I want to at least check that out. And Loki, I love Tom Hiddleston because he's one of the greatest Shakespearean actors, actually, of our time. So not that I don't expect anyone here to go watch him do his Coriolanus, but it's pretty superb. Anyway, so I'm a huge fan of his, and so I might check that out. Yeah, other than that, I do think Marvel's decade was the 2010s, and I think a good segue into the next thing is the 2020s. I think is going to be Star Wars's the decade of Star Wars.
Yeah.
So if you want to continue on, Matt, or if anyone has anything else to say about Marvel.
Yeah, well, I guess before we move on, do you guys have any closing thoughts on the Marvel segment before we continue on here?
Well, I think, Jeremy, you pointed out something interesting, which is the idea that Marvel will become a little bit more niche. And I think that's definitely true when you see them branching out in all these different directions. When you have all of these films building up to Endgame, it feels like I need to connect all of the threads. I need to watch all the material. And with the next decade of Marvel, there is almost too much content for you to see everything.
Yeah.
Now, yes, of course, they're spacing it out. Every 2 months, there's a new Marvel show or a new Marvel movie. But at the same time, it's more like a choose your own adventure. I'm going to choose that I'm going to follow the cosmic films. So I'm going to see the Guardians of the Galaxy films and Thor. I'm going to just follow that. Or I do want to follow all the multiversal madness, and I want to watch WandaVision, and I want to watch Spider-Man, and I want to watch Doctor Strange. So you can kind of pick and choose, what is my focus when it comes to the MCU? Who are the characters I attach to? Because now you don't necessarily need to see every single Marvel film. You can, and there will be things to connect them, but they will all stand in their own pillars until, of course, they all come tumbling down and Galactus shows up and wrecks everything or whatever they decide to do. But for a little bit here, you're going to, have individual films that some are going to be more successful than others. And some are going to have their fans where others are just less popular. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, this is all just part of Disney spending $8 to $9 billion over the next 3 years making content for Disney Plus. The investors asked for the dividend to not be given to the investors this year, and instead to spend that money on more Disney Plus content, and that is exactly what Disney is going to do.
Very interesting. Well, Jeremy, nothing final?
No, and we're gonna talk a lot about that, I'm sure, in our next topic. But yeah, let's move on, Matt.
All right, moving on to Lucasfilm, probably the most ambitious of the announcement slates. Lucasfilm announced that 10 Star Wars series are under development for Disney+, 2 of which will take place in the Mandalorian timeframe, Rangers of the New Republic, and Ahsoka. Star Wars The Bad Batch is announced as an animated series about the Bad Batch of clones from the Clone Wars. Star Wars Andor, starring Diego Luna, will be released in 2022. Oh wow, that's a name. The Acolyte is how that's pronounced, I believe. The Acolyte will be a new series set in the High Republic era and will premiere on Disney+. A droid story is in development and will feature a new companion to C-3PO and R2-D2. Donald Glover is set to reprise his turn as Lando in Star Wars. Lando. That's the name of that series. And an anime anthology series is in development called Star Wars Visions. In terms of movies, the next Star Wars film will be Rogue Squadron and will come out December 2023. Lucasfilm also confirmed that an untitled Taika Waititi Star Wars film is in development as well. Finally, there will be one more Indiana Jones film set to release July of 2022, of course, starring none other than Harrison Ford himself. Now, let's go ahead and take another pause right here to talk about Lucasfilm and what I thought would be the least interesting part to me. I thought was going to be the Lucasfilm segment, just because I'm so burnt out on Star Wars. The Mandalorian is something that I keep off to the side and don't necessarily. I don't know. It's hard to explain my relationship with Star Wars, but yeah, Ahsoka, New Republic shows are 2 shows that I'm very excited to see. Freddy, what are your thoughts on all of these brand new Lucasfilm projects that were just announced?
Well, I think it's really interesting after kind of the false start of the new sequel trilogy and kind of the ending being Rise of Skywalker and kind of burning the entire audience out. They still succeeded with The Mandalorian. Yeah. And that's something that they grabbed onto, and they used Mandalorian as the evidence of what the entire Star Wars franchise is going to be from now on. And it's interesting to see how all of a sudden you see creatively Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni kind of taking over the direction of Star Wars. Now, when it comes to Kathleen Kennedy, her career at Lucasfilm is supposedly ending. Her contract was not renewed. So she will be finishing, I believe, this year or next year. I'm not sure at this point. But either way, it sounds like if oh no, it's not Dave Filoni. If Jon Favreau wants to take the role and he wants to take the seat as president of Lucasfilm, he'll be taking that position and sort of dictating the future of the franchise. Now, we are only seeing the next 2 to 3 years of Star Wars, kind of, except I guess Taika's film, which might be 2024, 2025, who knows? But you're right that this might just be the decade of Star Wars. And so we'll really see where things go. I mean, The Mandalorian's a success, and it seems to really understand what Star Wars is. I mean, it does help that you did bring George Lucas to consult, and they actually, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni met with George Lucas and actually said, hey, does this seem on brand? Does this mix in with your inspirations, which were so successful? And it's like, yes, all right, this is how it works. But the understanding of what Star Wars is while still expanding upon it and having fun with different genres and paying homage to the past while expanding into the future has proven to be successful. All you have to do is walk through Buena Vista Street in downtown Disney and see all of the child merchandise on all of the walls and all the Mandalorian merchandise to see just how, Disney is taking this. It's like they went from having nothing when the Mandalorian show premiered to all of a sudden that takes over the entire merchandising division. And it's really interesting seeing them double down. Yes, you have Rangers of the New Republic and you have Ahsoka, which will then reconvene with the Mandalorian in a big event. Mandalorian set to return next year in December. So we'll see how everything plays out. I'm really excited about The Acolyte, bringing in the High Republic and the fact that they're just starting that initiative in January. They're starting to tell stories in this new era where they're trying to expand out and talk about a period before the Jedi and the Sith conflict. It's very intriguing to see, how are you going to tell this story? How is it going to play out? And with the Acolyte being the end of the High Republic and signifying the beginning of the Republic that we kind of see in the prequels, it'll be intriguing to see how that, combines with the stories that have already been told. There are some hints that we might just see Darth Plagueis the Wise pop up in that show, and sort of the idea of leaning into the origin of the rule of two and how this all started. Where does all of this come from? Well, we're going to talk about the dark side in this show, and that's exciting to see. But above all of the projects that were announced, I'm probably the most excited for Patty Jenkins's film Rogue Squadron. Just the story she told about her dad being a fighter pilot, and it's like, I want to make the ultimate fighter pilot movie, and I finally found the story. I finally found where I can tell that. And to do that in Star Wars, when you have everything, like anytime an X-Wing shows up on screen and you just hear the noise of it flying overhead in Rogue One or in any of these films, you do any sort of trench run, anything like that, it just brings me right back into the excitement of the franchise and what it can really do. For me, Rise of Skywalker, there's a lot of problems with it, but there are moments where, Poe Dameron's flying in his X-Wing and they're flying in space, and I'm just like, there you go. That's what I'm looking for. Can you deliver more of this, please? So I'm just really excited to see that. Star Wars, it seems to be coming together, and we just have to wait and see if these films really do succeed or not. I'm still holding back a little bit, because after the sequel trilogy, I feel like we do need to be a little critical.
Sure, yeah.
In terms of how these things go. It's not the Marvel franchise. When it comes to Marvel films or a Marvel television show, I believe that I'm going to watch that and I'm going to be thoroughly entertained. Marvel Studios means something now. They've made it mean something by a decade of evidence. Yes, there's the occasional film that doesn't work out, but overall, it's this, complete thing that succeeds and it works. And Star Wars needs that desperately now more than ever, because all of a sudden you're looking at Star Wars and over half the films are not successes, at least, in terms of the fan base and in terms of critics. So now you actually have to make up for that. So we'll just see how that goes.
Jeremy, what about you?
Yeah, no, it's true. I think we definitely have to be critical. There's so many layers to the criticism of the sequel trilogy, though, that I don't know if necessarily Disney has learned those lessons per se, but there definitely was this false start, and it's unfortunate because you want a major Star Wars trilogy, especially one that continues on the Skywalker stories. It's a bummer. And the thing is, the more and more time goes by after Rise of Skywalker, you really look back at that trilogy and go, boy, did they drop the ball. Boy, did they drop the ball. I do think people took their frustration to really inappropriate levels. I'm not going to lie. I didn't find The Last Jedi to be that horribly wrong or bad to the Star Wars universe or the Skywalker story. And I think people took that anger out on people and in the movie, and that was really, really bad. Anyway, but I mean... but here's the thing, The Mandalorian, I think part of why it's such a phenomenon is because that Star Wars, that feels like right where we left off. Feels like, it doesn't matter when it takes place or who it's focusing on. That feels like Star Wars. So, I think Disney learned their lesson, I guess, in terms of like who is best to carry the torch. And I agree with you. I didn't fully understand the Kathleen Kennedy hate. She's given us some of the most influential popular movies ingrained in our popular culture of all time. I don't think she is the enemy at all. But if she is leaving, and it sounds like she is, I would love for Jon Favreau to take over Lucasfilm. I think his level of innovation in terms of how to integrate technology into storytelling is the last person like that was George Lucas. The person before George Lucas was Walt Disney. I think there's a great line of legacy there. And honestly, I've been an advocate for Jon Favreau leading a lot of things within the blanket of Disney. I'd love to see him get involved with the parks. But anyway, that's a different conversation. But I'm kind of excited for, and I've never really gotten into anime at all, but this just sounds so intriguing to me. The idea of an anthology series, and the fact that it would be animated. That sounds like there's a lot of potential there, and I'm curious about that. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to that too. Yeah, Star Wars Visions. I've always wanted to see an interpretation of Star Wars done in the anime art form, and just the way that is portrayed. I mean, and I'm looking for a reinterpretation. I don't want you to just do shot for shot and, do this. What would you do if you're handed Star Wars and you can tell it in a different manner, which seems to be what they're doing with a lot of these different shows. I think it's really different too, because when it came to the sequel era and when Disney bought Star Wars, it's like, here's the one movie that's coming and we're not really going to tease the next one until we're a year out from that happening. It's like there was so much secrecy, and the secrecy really came from not knowing what they were doing. There wasn't a plan.
Yeah.
And the difference between that, when Disney bought Star Wars, and it's like, we're doing new movies. We don't know what the plan is, but we're greenlighting them. Let's go. Versus right now where it's like, okay, Mandalorian's a success. So now it gets 2 spinoffs and we continue the show. Let's start other series and see how they go. And then we'll continue from there. But we know where they're going. We know how they can interconnect. So there's a plan now. There's a structure. There's a strategy, which you might notice is being kind of borrowed from the Marvel franchise, from the MCU, which Kevin Feige was announced to be producing a film. Who knows if that's Taika Waititi's or if that's actually going to be the Rogue Squadron film. It's also possible that they just invited Kevin Feige to come over and say, what would you do with Star Wars? And he was in the meeting with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and Kathleen Kennedy, and they were actually structuring something out. I do want to grab onto something that you said, Jeremy, in terms of Kathleen Kennedy, and she has been an amazing producer in Hollywood, one of the greatest. She's produced all of our childhood favorite films and franchises. And yes, she might not understand what Star Wars was, and she was attached to that franchise, and she was chosen by George Lucas to be in that role. And we just didn't know at that time that she had really no connection to the Star Wars brand. She greenlit the things that she personally was connected to and was like, that's going to expand upon this. And her heart was in the right place. Her heart was in the right place, but in the end she clashed with her filmmakers and things just didn't feel structured. That doesn't mean that she's a bad person or that she's even a bad producer.
Yeah.
Because everything else shows something different. Also, the fact that most of those movies still ended up making $1 billion at the box office still says something. The films don't have to be amazing pieces of art to still connect to people and to still bring people out to the theaters. So in the end, her era is still significant in that it brought Star Wars back. The Mandalorian only happened because of the sequels. The fact is that it's not like there's a big gap. It's not like we had a sequel, we had Rise of Skywalker and then there was no Star Wars for another 10 years.
Yeah.
Star Wars is still happening. In fact, it's accelerating, So we might have a little bit of gap because of 2020 and because of production and actually trying to plan out the following, franchise. And that's another thing too, is that this Rogue Squadron film is also supposed to start something new. So I do expect it to be a new entry in a franchise. I expect there to be a trilogy of Rogue Squadron films or what have you. Who even knows with Taika Waititi and what he's going to bring to the table.
Yeah.
That logo was interesting. It actually reminded me of Schoolhouse Rock, and I was like, what is going on here? But it's just a very interesting thing to see as that franchise, similar to Marvel, they're experimenting, they're doing new things.
Yeah, and I guess one thing we also left off, at least this is a big announcement to me for the Obi-Wan series. We have Hayden Christensen returning as not Anakin, but as Darth Vader.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And it's kind of interesting to me how over like the past few years, how the prequels have done like a complete 180, where like the people who grew up with them are now starting to use the internet. They're getting nostalgic about the prequels, and it's like they've done like a 180. Like, oh, people love the prequels now. When did this happen? I'm glad that the prequels are being embraced more. Jared, do you have something to say?
No, I mean, I grew up with the prequels.
Yeah.
I grew up with the prequels. I never thought they were good then. I certainly don't think they're good
That's fair.
now, but
That's
I do
true,
think
sure.
when people look back on it, yeah, it is. There's definitely childhood nostalgia. I mean, going to see a new Star Wars movie when you're a kid, that's so exciting. Yeah, I think it's more. Oh, but at least George Lucas was involved. At least he was trying,
Sure.
to give us something interesting. It was not. They were not written well. They were not structured well. The characters were not developed well. But he kind of does what he kind of goes. Okay, how can I communicate better what I want to communicate? We get things like Clone Wars with Dave Filoni. You know, but that was sort of a tag team thing. So. Anyway, I think that's why we kind of look back at it and go, well, at least he was trying to really do something. But yeah, no, they're not good.
Yeah, I guess fair to point out they're not good movies. Yeah.
When it comes to Clone Wars too, how that elevated our view of the prequels. There are certain moments that they have in the Clone Wars show that tie back into those films and help them. It's like you look back on the prequels with rose-colored glasses and you're like, I'm not actually going to go watch those movies. But I think that they're greater than they truly are based off of how good the Clone Wars is. The Clone Wars redeems that era and reconnects it to the original trilogy and makes everything cohesive. And that's something that I'm excited to see with the Bad Batch, and how that is literally you see the Clone Wars logo burn away and now it's the Bad Batch.
Yeah.
You're seeing the aftermath of Order 66, and you're seeing the transformation of a republic into the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really the way you can play with that and what you can say in such a show is something ambitious, and I can't wait to see how that story is told. Again, Dave Filoni is going to be involved, so that it's being shepherded and overseen by the right people. And when it comes to Obi-Wan, being able to tell that story and connect with that character again, and yes, you bring back Hayden Christensen and he's able to, actually have some decently written dialogue and be in that role. I'm excited to see how that all plays out. And I think, as that nostalgia has been brought back for our generation in terms of looking at those films, looking at the Clone Wars, we do want to see those actors return to those roles and play them once again. So it'll be interesting to see how Obi-Wan tells that story and what happens. They tease an epic battle between the two, which when I originally looked at it, I'm like, how do you do that, canonically? But then you look and you're like, well, there's nothing that really says that the last interaction that Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader had was fighting on Mustafar. There's nothing in canon that says that was their last interaction. So who knows what's going to happen next? I'm excited. Who knows?
I wish I knew. I guess we all wish we knew.
We'll find out. We'll find out next year, whenever the show eventually comes out.
Yeah, I'm excited for Obi-Wan, but I think we can sort of end off here on the final sort of announcement about the next installment in the Indiana Jones film coming out in July of 2022, of course, with Harrison Ford. I don't think have a lot to say when it comes to this new movie. The last one wasn't the best. Harrison Ford is getting sort of to that age where he doesn't really care about acting. Sometimes it feels like you've seen scenes in the new Star Wars movies are some examples. But what are your guys' thoughts on the new Indiana Jones movie coming out?
Oh, I'm excited for it. I think it'll try to redeem the horrible Crystal Skull. Maybe we'll see. It could be bad. But here's no. I think Harrison Ford isn't overacting. I think he's over just the total absurdity of Hollywood. And I love how he is just so open about that. So yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we have so much more ground to cover. So, but yeah.
I will note real quick. They did iterate that this was the final Indiana Jones installment. They did state that this was the final one. This is going to cap off the franchise. Does that really mean that we won't see characters from the new movie, or that they'll use this final Indiana Jones film to start spinning off Disney Plus shows. Who knows? I probably at this point expect that from Lucasfilm. But I am excited about the director, James Mangold from Logan, Ford v Ferrari. He was actually tapped to helm a Captain Nemo film for Disney back when 20th Century Fox was trying to do theirs. And from that, he actually left the Captain Nemo film, which is what he was supposed to do for Disney. And now that's become the Indiana Jones film that he's doing for them. Steven Spielberg left the project because he didn't want to direct a movie that had to deal with Nazis. So we'll see where things go. Again, they are going to try and redeem After Crystal Skull. I am definitely excited, and I think we can move on.
All right. I'm excited too. We'll see how it ends up happening. But moving on here to, of course, Disney animation. Raya and the Last Dragon will premiere on March 5th, 2021 as part of the Premiere Access sort of section on Disney Plus, and it will also be released in theaters. A series based on Big Hero 6 called Baymax is in development for a 2022 release. Zootopia Plus will be a Zootopia series set to release in 2022. This is one I'm excited for. Princess Tiana will get her own series called Tiana, which will premiere in 2023. And there will also be a Moana musical series set for 2023 as well. A new film called Encanto will be a feature film set in Colombia and a score penned by Lin-Manuel Miranda. And finally, a series made in partnership with, Kugali. Oh my gosh, Jeremy, how do I pronounce this? Kugali. There we go. Kugali Media called Iwaju, I believe is how that one is pronounced. Will premiere in 2022 as well, and we can sort of take a pause there. I'd like to highlight the Princess Tiana series is probably the one I'm most excited for out of all of these. Princess and the Frog, one of the great Disney, I guess not just Disney princess films, but Disney animated films, in my opinion. So I'm very excited that Tiana will be getting her own series, getting to continue the story. Hopefully she won't be a frog this time. But yeah, Jeremy, what are your thoughts here on all of these Disney animation announcements that were just made?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm excited for Encanto. Any new material, it's like you have to kind of dig to find the new original stuff out of all these announcements. We'll probably talk about that later, but that is exciting. I hope it's good. I hope it's really good. This is the beginning of truly the beginnings of the Jennifer Lee helmed Disney Animation Studios. So I hope she's getting the resources that she needs. It sounds like she has a lot of potential in the direction she wants to take the studio. And this is the beginnings of that. So we will see.
When it comes to Disney animation, you have Raya and the Last Dragon sort of kicking off these things. And the fact that they're doing a brand new fantasy franchise that is also set in a Southeast Asian inspired world, I'm really excited. I personally grew up in Indonesia for 4 years, from when I was 5 to when I was 9. And so personally, just to see that culture, and to see the art of like Indonesia and Thailand and Malaysia, to see that brought into a Disney animated film, I just couldn't be happier or more excited. And the potential of that, plus the theme park potential, I'm like, I can't wait to see a temple in a jungle designed and built properly. Maybe we will actually see a dragon coaster, which they've been trying to do for like 30 years now at Disney. But either way, I'm just excited to see them do new things. You have Encanto, which they talk about a magical family living in a magic house. I'm wondering if they're going to decide to build a version of that could potentially be a new version of Mystic Manor. I'm just going to say that. But just to be bringing in different cultures, to actually have a film that's set in Latin America being done by Disney Animation and being done right, bringing on the right cultural experts and the right filmmakers to actually achieve these things. It's exciting to see Disney Animation come into its own, and really have these unique films and unique franchises being kickstarted. I'm glad that you are seeing a Baymax show and a Zootopia show, but they're coming as Disney Plus series, not as actual sequel films. They're not taking up the room that allows Encanto and allows Raya and the Last Dragon to breathe. And I'm just so happy that that's happening. When it comes to Tiana, it's 2023. kind of a rumored time frame when it comes to other Princess and the Frog related projects.
Uh-huh.
So we'll see how that all ties in. Corporate synergy. Again, exploring New Orleans, and who knows, we might even visit Prince Naveen's city, wherever that is, or his country. Kind of teased to potentially be Middle East based, but who knows? But just adding in extra elements into this and expanding that franchise is it's really exciting to see. I just can't wait to see how that plays into also the attraction and building up that entire franchise. I don't think you would see that show without the fact that they're making the ride. You know, without that happening, that franchise would have been left behind. And I'm so glad that it's being brought back in a big way.
Yeah, and I guess
that's interesting because
rock, paper, scissors.
Just talk.
Okay. I was gonna say, but I think one of the great things about these big series as well, like Freddy mentioned, is that the fact that Tiana, Zootopia, Moana, all those other series could possibly go on for more seasons than just one. So it's not like we're just getting, like you mentioned, a sequel movie and then that's it. We could possibly be getting more series following Tiana, following Moana, following Zootopia. All great stuff. Jeremy, what were you going to say?
No, it kind of puts things in perspective a little bit. You start to wonder if we were told we actually were working on the Princess and the Frog, retheme of Splash Mountain before, and possibly wasn't announced publicly because they were going to somehow tie it into this series, which was probably already in talks of being in development as well. So I do think that synergistic part of it is no coincidence, and it probably was the plan the whole time, but one had to be pushed out first. So I think that plan was sort of, the announcement plan was muddled, but it certainly will, I think, relate to each other. I think that was probably the intention from the start.
And I'll add into that real quick. The fact that it's coming out in 2023 really, to me, speaks that they had no intention of doing this or that it was part of the plan. There are some aspects of this that a lot of the decisions made to greenlight certain things when it comes to Disney animation and Pixar were made in 2020 because of 2020. Because all of a sudden Disney Plus is the future of the company, and so now they're going to invest in all these things. I wouldn't have imagined that they would do Disney animation. Disney Animation, the actual studio itself, is going to do series for Disney Plus. Pixar is actually going to do content for Disney Plus, not Toon Studios, not some random offshoot. The studio itself is now making content for the streaming service. That is only because we are now relying more on streaming than we ever have previously. That the content, and this is something that we'll talk about a little bit later, but that the content industry has now overtaken the Hollywood, theater industry. And that's kind of the direction we're heading. The other thing with Princess and the Frog is an attraction. There were conversations, and this is something that I've personally, had conversations with people who knew the goings on and what happened. And it's a situation where while these conversations might have been had, nothing was moving forward until this past summer, when all of a sudden this became not just a conversation within the company about, involving just Princess and the Frog and Splash Mountain, but involving everything that they're doing, which leads into the conversation about this new studio coming out of Nigeria and making Iwaju and making this film. Iwaju translates to the future. And yes, we've seen, Wakanda, a vision of like futurism mixed with African culture, Afrofuturism being presented on the big screen. Well, now we're seeing an interpretation that's actually coming from a studio based in Africa, based in Nigeria, coming in and also being produced by Disney and being brought to American audiences. And to see that is something that I'm really excited. And I don't think you would have seen that in 2019. You wouldn't have seen that before 2020, before this year happened. It's the fallout of this year is it really has changed everything. And it's changed Disney just as much as it's changed everyone else.
Very good points brought up by both of you guys. But I think, unless you guys have any final thoughts here on Disney Studios, we can move on to Pixar. Of course, the popular Spark Shorts series will be continuing with a new short titled Burrow, releasing on Christmas Day this year. And Pixar will also be producing a new series of shorts based on their existing properties, calling it Pixar Popcorn, great name. Pixar will also be producing series for Disney Plus, 3 to be exact. The first is a series based on the Cars franchise. Secondly, a series focusing on Doug from the film Up. And finally, they will be releasing Win or Lose, a series detailing a middle school softball team's game from the perspective of the different players and coaches. Of course, Pixar also has movies planned for future release. The first is named Luca, and it will be set in Italy and will focus on a boy for which the film is named. Next is a movie called Lightyear, and this is very interesting. The origin story for the character in which the famous Buzz Lightyear toy is based off of. Finally, Pixar will be releasing a film entitled Turning Red, focusing on a teenage girl going through puberty who turns into a red panda whenever she gets excited. And we can sort of take a pause there. I'd like to sort of throw something out there that I think a lot of people will agree with. I see Pixar as like the S tier of major animation studios. I think a lot of you guys could agree with that. Pixar, I don't really know who would be A tier right beneath them. But yeah, Pixar, love Pixar. I'm very excited that they're going to be continuing the Spark short series, of course. All the ones that they've already put out are really amazing. And if you guys haven't watched those on Disney Plus, watch them. Support the smaller directors that are being given a chance to highlight their talents in these amazing shorts. And I'd like to focus on some of these new series. The Cars series is something that I'd never... I would have thought Disney would have wanted to sort of put the Cars franchise behind them at this point. But I guess now we see Cars making a return for a new series. But yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on all of these Pixar announcements? Let's go ahead and start with Freddy here.
Well, I think similar to Disney Animation, where they're having the Jennifer Lee era begins, here you have the Pete Docter era begin in terms of all of these new films, starting with Soul and the way that the entire company is like moving forward, at least in that direction. And they're also doing something similar to Disney Animation, having these shows that continue different stories. So yes, we have the Cars franchise and we had Cars 3 and everything. But in the end, instead of having a full slate of it's Toy Story 5 and it's Cars, 4, instead of doing that, instead you get these shows, you get these Disney Plus series that are continuations that do expand those worlds. I mean, you have Cars Land, and the Cars franchise in terms of merchandise and popularity is still a big deal to people, to families especially. And so it's good that they're finding a home on Disney Plus and that is still generating content in that, but I'm glad it's not taking up the theatrical spots of something like Soul or Turning Red, which Turning Red is a type of film that you would only see from Pixar. You would only see Pixar covering puberty and all of that. Like, I can't believe that that's a film that's being made. And even Disney Animation wouldn't be doing that. Disney Animation is going to do fantasy stories. They're going to continue in that direction and building out these worlds, where Pixar is experimenting. They're telling stories of what happens when you die. The questions of life, the meaning of everything. That's Soul. Like, who else would be making that? Only Pixar would be that ambitious. So it's really exciting to see that. It's also interesting that at the same time you're doing those things and being that ambitious, you decide to make a film called Lightyear.
Yeah.
Which I actually think is something that is incredibly exciting for a multitude of reasons. Yes, of course, it could be considered a Toy Story spin-off to everyone, but at the same time, they're saying, we're taking the idea of this character. We're taking the idea of this Space Ranger toy, the version of Star Wars in the Pixar universe. And we're saying, we're not talking about the toy and its story. We're talking about the person that the toy is based off of. What is the story that's being told about this character that is unique and very separate from the Toy Story franchise? The Toy Story connection is the buy-in to the franchise itself. It's what happens when you take Lightyear and put it in theaters. Everyone who went and saw a Toy Story movie is going to be intrigued and go watch it. But at the same time, you're open to telling something new, to telling a new story, and giving a new translation to what the future is when it comes to Pixar and when it comes to Disney. Yes, you had WALL-E, which has its own messaging and it has something serious to say. With Lightyear, I expect them to, yes, be serious and yes, have all the connections and all the entanglements that any Pixar film does. But at the same time, I expect there to be an element of joy and excitement and thrill that other interpretations of futurism just haven't had from Disney's perspective. I expect at this point that out of Lightyear, Disney will try and reinvent Tomorrowland. Now, something that they didn't talk about during the investors panel was the upcoming Tron film that they're working on and the upcoming Space Mountain movie, which just began development. But all of these are taking place around the same time. So you have all of these interpretations of what the future is going to look like, all being brought together when Disney is desperately searching around for something to grab onto when it comes to both Epcot's vision of the future and Future World and Tomorrowland at Disneyland. They're looking for something to help be the new identity for those. And that's the potential that I see in something like Lightyear.
Nice. Jeremy, any thoughts?
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard to follow. I mean, hard act to follow. I basically agree with all of that. I actually think that'd be kind of cool for Tomorrowland, just because we have Epcot, even if Epcot isn't. The problem is Epcot, to me, the point of influence should always be the real world, the world in which we live. And I love that Tony Baxter quote they had in the Imagineering story, which was like, I'm gonna butcher it, but it was like Disneyland or the Magic Kingdom, like Disneyland is about. I'm going to butcher it. I'm not going to say it, but basically, Epcot is like the things that are exciting and magical about fantastical about the real world. How the real world has very exciting things in it. Anyway, he said it better than I ever will. Cut that. So I'm very excited for Luca. I think that's going to be really interesting and intimate and honest. I want less animation that always has to feel like it has to be magic. And I long for a new Bambi. I long for something really deeply grounded in the real world that tells a deeply intimate and truthful story that reveals a lot about just our humanity. And I think that movie has potential to do that. And I miss that in animation, and I hope that that is coming back.
Yes, and before we move on here, shout out to Eric for the $3 super chat titled All My Brothers Eat with the horns and the fist. So thank you, Eric, for the $3 donation. And yeah, one thing, I guess, before we move on here, just something I'd like to mention here. The Buzz Lightyear film, Lightyear, Buzz Lightyear will not be voiced by Tim Allen. He will be voiced by Chris Evans. So that's a very interesting change that, to be honest, I'm welcome to a change in voice actor. I think Chris Evans is a great guy, great actor. We'll see how well he does here in his upcoming film Lightyear. Let's see. Yeah, and I think unless you guys have any final thoughts, we can go ahead and Freddy, you have something to say?
Real quick, and I just want to make this clear. When you see the teaser image that they had for Lightyear, if you look at his helmet, you can actually see lines that are inspired by the second lift tunnel on Space Mountain at Disneyland. That orange light strips. The other thing is I noticed that, he's sitting inside this dark cockpit. Something similar that's at Epcot, and this is the connection that I was trying to draw, is they have the Space Pavilion there. They have Mission Space.
Right.
And by the time this comes out, Mission Space is going to start looking like it could use some sort of update. And I think Lightyear is the type of thing that can make that exciting and make that fresh and new. When it comes to Luca, this is something that I forgot about even. But that's another of those films. It's just like Turning Red, and it's like what they're doing with Soul. They're telling a different story. They're expanding out and doing something that Pixar has always strived to do. And it seems like it's returning back to what Pixar used to do. It's returning to the types of stories that really started it, that really made Pixar what it is. And that's kind of all I have to say on that. I just can't wait to see that come out.
Lots of great stuff in the works. And finally, let's go ahead and finish with some Disney live action news. A series based on the Beauty and the Beast, Swiss Family Robinson, and Percy Jackson and the Olympians will be releasing on Disney Plus. Furthermore, a series based off the Mighty Ducks will be appearing on Disney Plus alongside a Turner and Hooch series. Big Shot is a series focused on high school basketball, and the Mysterious Benedict Society will be based on the book series by the same name. When it comes to movies, Hocus Pocus will be receiving a sequel, and Three Men and a Baby, Cheaper by the Dozen, and Sister Act will be rebooted with new casts. Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers will be an animation live-action hybrid film starring John Mulaney? Is that how that's pronounced, I believe? John Mulaney and Andy Samberg. Pinocchio will be translated into live action and star Tom Hanks. Peter Pan will be receiving the same treatment and will be titled Peter Pan and Wendy. The film Enchanted, did not expect this announcement, will be followed up with a sequel named Disenchanted. And of course, The Jungle Cruise, Cruella, and The Little Mermaid, and a prequel to The Lion King were all previewed as well. Now that's our final segment here, but let's go ahead and take a pause to recap on all of this stuff. And this is sort of the stuff where you're sort of like, okay, live action reboots coming back. Oh, do people really want to? Oh, my Siri just went off. Oh my gosh, it recorded that whole paragraph that I just wrote. Siri did. Yeah, so part of the video here. Do we really want, a prequel to Beauty and the Beast? Swiss Family Robinson reboot could be interesting. But yeah, I'm excited to hear what you guys have to think about all of these Disney live action projects that were announced. Jeremy, let's go ahead and start with you here.
Yeah, this is where you go, okay, wow, yeah, they're learning lessons with Lucasfilm. They're getting really experimental and creative with Marvel. Looks like Disney Animation, there actually might be a true renaissance on the, emerging. Then you get to the live action slate and you go, okay, maybe they didn't learn all their lessons. I don't know what information they're getting that suggests that somehow the public likes these things. The public finds this stuff to be a laughing stock. It has nothing to do with the hard work that goes into making these movies at all, or the talent that's brought in to be in the movies at all. It has to do with more of the corporate mind set regarding them. So I kind of look at that and go, okay, they learned some lessons. I don't know what information they're getting that suggests that people want Pinocchio remade. I just don't know. I don't think it's just super fans of the history of Disney like me that find that to be totally weird. Or a Lion King prequel to the live action one. Weird. I just find it weird. I'm not really looking forward to this. Really, anything. Some of the original stuff like Big Shot, that'll be interesting. That'll be good. But I don't really see myself. I'll only watch this if I'm home here with my family and they want to watch it. But I really don't. I'm not interested.
Well, I think it's interesting where you see both Beauty and the Beast and Lion King. They might not be critically well received or received well by fans, but they still made $1 billion each. And so when they're talking
you bully
to investors,
movie theaters into showing your, anyway.
But when they talk to investors, they're like, "Hey, look, people spent $1 billion to make these movies, successful, and we made all this money off of them. So we're going to continue moving forward. Because if it's just from the numbers analytics side, then Beauty and the Beast makes it. Josh Gad, you want to do a live action show for Disney Plus? Well, we're not going to let you do your Muppets, but we're going to give you this Beauty and the Beast show." Josh Gad tried to reboot the Muppets. He tried to bring the Muppet Show to Disney Plus, and they wouldn't let him do it. So, oh well.
That's a shame.
And then when it comes to The Lion King, I do have a little bit more intrigue with that, because when they teased it, they said that this was basically going to be, it's a prequel about Mufasa and him taking over the animal kingdom, which I think is an interesting thing. And it's going to be done in the vein of The Godfather. What?
Okay.
So I'm incredibly intrigued. So then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, you're taking Lion King and now you're doing this entire other thing with it. I actually think that's interesting.
Wow, is it going to be revealed that it's actually a crime family?
Yeah.
This is really intriguing.
You wonder where Scar gets it. You wonder what's happening here. I'm like, wow, this is actually that has a lot of incredible implications. And of course, they're bringing back a whole bunch of cast. They're bringing in some new cast members, and it's interesting to see Pharrell Williams is hopping on board to help do music for it, and everybody because a whole bunch of artists, they want to come and bring something to it. So there's a little bit more when it comes to the Lion King prequel than the Beauty and the Beast prequel or whatever they're trying to do with that show. The fact that they didn't even give it a name, they just said Beauty and the Beast prequel. It's like, what a name. What a pending title. How fascinating. And with the live action, there's some things that I find interesting. Okay, Robert Zemeckis wanted to come in. Tom Hanks, really the reason that's happening, the Pinocchio film's happening, is because Tom Hanks came in and said, hey, I want to be Geppetto. Before Tom Hanks, it was Robert Downey Jr. who came in and said, I want to be Geppetto. I want to play this character. But now it's Tom Hanks. But it's those actors saying, hey, I want to sign off on this project.
Yeah.
And maybe that doesn't mean that it's going to be good or that it should be even done. But that actor says, hey, I want to play this iconic role and I want to sing, Wish Upon a Star and be iconic for a minute. Well, sure, you can do that, but I'm glad it's happening on Disney Plus and not happening in theaters. Yeah. It's not taking up a theatrical spot. You'll notice with a lot of these live action announcements, most of them are for Disney Plus, not for theaters. And they're saving those theatrical announcements for future D23s or what have you. And those future announcements are a future Tron sequel and whatever they're deciding to do when it comes to Space Mountain. So they are, and Jungle Cruise is a good example. They're trying a new franchise. They're trying to do something. And I encourage them to take something like a Jungle Cruise. And you can see that, similar to Pirates of the Caribbean, it's not the ride is now the movie. It is, we're trying to take the ideas, take the themes, take the experience, and deliver that in a theatrical way. I'm more encouraged to see more of that, at least attempted, than more live action reboots of old animated classics, which I'm fine with those being on Disney Plus. I'm fine with you trying to do a Lady and the Tramp, which is also a cute little film on Disney Plus. Doing Peter Pan in that vein and putting it on Disney Plus is fascinating to me. I'm like, that could be very interesting. Jude Law as Captain Hook. Who doesn't want to see that? That could be exciting. But at the same time, you're still seeing Disney feature films and feature, the live action aspect being locked into nostalgia, which has its power, but also has its limitations. Marvel and Star Wars are experimenting. Pixar and Disney Animation are experimenting. And then live action feels like it's stuck in the past. It feels like it's stuck 10 years ago. It's still making Maleficent and it's still making all of this content. Yeah. And it's like, why?
I agree with you. And the funny thing is that to me, it doesn't deliver on my nostalgia. It doesn't deliver on the feeling I have of Pinocchio, or the idea of Pinocchio that we have in our collective consciousness. It tries to, but it doesn't really do it. Ironically, I think what is more successful at tapping into the genuine nostalgia is actually new experimental work, because I've always argued that is the legacy of Disney. That is the contribution to cinema that Disney has made. And when Disney leans into that direction, you get more films that are more ingrained in the popular culture than a remake or an underfunded animated film. That's the only way that the Disney Renaissance exists, and those are a part of that legacy of Walt's day. That's why we equate that period to like the Big Five, when the studio was just starting to get into feature-length films. So ironically, when I hear stuff about like Encanto, it intrigues me more, because to me that feels more like Disney, in this age where not much does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows when it really comes to these things and how they're going to be successful. Now, the whole Peter Pan, reboot is being directed by the same director who did Pete's Dragon, which I actually like that film because it's a reinterpretation of the original story, the original movie. So taking something that, okay, we have this Disney animation classic and it's telling the story, but then we try and reinterpret it. We try and bring it to audiences in a different way. I'm intrigued to see that. My biggest disappointment with watching Lion King was basically a shot-for-shot remake. That's not what I'm looking to see.
Yeah.
I'm looking for interesting elements. I'm looking for some experimentation. I don't mind the ideas of bringing franchises and bringing some nostalgia, but if you're going to try and tell the exact same story and you're going to do it worse, that's not good. Yeah. And I feel like that really comes from, sort of you're coming from the wrong direction, when it comes to Disney. Is it's like they're not, this isn't the studio that made the Pirates franchise what it was for a period of time. It's kind of lost its way while everything else around it has blossomed and grown. I still think that there's some hope on the horizon for them to return to that and to have some interesting filmmakers come in and make something special. And I hope that happens. But when you have Jon Favreau, who did Jungle Book and he did Lion King, and then he moved on, he was already kind of distracted with Mandalorian and making that what it was. And so now he's fully in the Star Wars camp. It's like, who is going to direct the future of Disney live action? And we just don't know. There were some rumors out this previous week that Alan Horn, who's been heading up the whole entire feature film department at Disney, is looking to retire. He came out of retirement because Bob Iger asked him to. And so now that Bob Iger is finally leaving the company, he's finally leaving Chapek to take over as CEO, Alan Horn's leaving too. And it's interesting to see all of Iger and all of his all the people who have stuck by him for 15 years at this point, they're all leaving with him. And so what happens when it is Chapek and Chris, you have Christopher Lee, you have Chris Lee, and you have like Jon Favreau, and you have Kevin Feige, and they're all left in a room together. What happens? What happens when Chapek is left with everyone else? When Iger, who has obviously been working the past 2 years to set up this creative slate, it's the only reason you're getting all this content is because Bob Iger left the job of CEO. He left the day-to-day job of dealing with shareholders, dealing with banks, making sure the finances are running smoothly. And he left that to creatively guide everything and guide his legacy, guide the future of Disney for the next 3 years. So I expect the next 3 years to be successful. His hand is reaching far into the future. The question is, what happens when those franchises are wrapping up, those shows are wrapping up, and you have to start making new content? And when those decisions are being made, how much will Chapek play into that? Because Chapek's era doesn't start for another 2 to 3 years now. And we know this because Bob Iger was the big voice during the panel itself. Yes, at the beginning you had a little bit of Chapek, but Chapek's just there to be the face, to communicate to investors and to shareholders. Hey, I'm the CEO. This is how we're doing. We're doing great. Here's the financials. Look at the numbers, because Chapek's a numbers guy. That's not bad. You need a numbers guy. You need a chief financial officer. But when he's your chief executive officer, things are a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And we're going to talk about that next.
Unless you guys have any final
Briefly.
thoughts you'd like to say before we move on here? No final thoughts?
No.
All right. Well, yeah, I guess that does it for our first topic of the day. And coming up, we'll dive deeper into how Disney is positioning itself for the coming decade. But first, of course, let's go ahead and take a quick sponsor break. To hear from the show's sponsors. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. If you guys are wondering where you can find even more family-friendly live streams, just like this one, head on over to theliveplace.com. The Live Place is your headquarters for great family-friendly live streams. They cover anything from Disney to other vacation spots, various variety shows, and have some amazing streamers like Resort TV 1 and myself. Also, be sure to check out puckermint.com, where you can find amazing pins and stickers. Puckermint is based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, just a few hours from where I live. And since I'm a big believer in supporting local artists, we decided to partner up. Be sure to use the coupon code down below when you make your next order. Again, that's puckermint.com and puckermint on Instagram. And we're back. Welcome back, everybody. And Jeremy, what do we have in store for our second and final topic of the evening?
Well, I know everyone's thinking, what is there more to talk about? And we've been going already for an hour and a half. So I think this will actually be brief. This is more analytical. It's more what is the big picture. I naively say we'll just share our brief thoughts and go home. But
last time you said that, we had a 4-hour
we'll try
episode.
To. Exactly. We'll try to. Basically, this is an extension of what we talked about. Disney asserts itself as major contender to lead the future of streaming. Last Thursday's Investor Day was a highly anticipated event The Walt Disney Company has been in the spotlight numerous times throughout the COVID crisis ever since it announced its parks would cease operation back in March. Business experts and fans alike have spent the past 9 months speculating on how the company would position itself not just for a recovery, but as a leader for the future of the industry. Last Thursday's 4-hour presentation not only gave the answer to these burning questions, but also gave a new perspective on the company's previous decade. While the exciting slate of new content certainly stole the show, Disney made some other important announcements. Due to all the new ambitious projects and features that will no doubt increase the value of owning a Disney Plus subscription, the monthly price will increase to $8.99 a month. This also applies for the popular Hulu/Disney Plus/ESPN bundle, which will now be offered for $18.99 a month. Disney also unveiled a new streaming service catered toward international markets, Star. Star will be included with international Disney Plus subscriptions, except for Latin America, and will be rolled out to Europe and other continents on February 23rd, 2021. A Hulu replacement, Star will be the central hub to view all FX 20th Century Studios 20th Century Television and other content not exclusive to Disney Plus alone. Disney's dedication to expanding their direct-to-consumer content was fully on display last Thursday, and with these announcements, Disney has positioned itself to be a major player in the ongoing direct-to-consumer war. When Bob Iger announced that a Disney-exclusive streaming service was in development only a few years ago, can you believe that? Many fans felt confused at the move, citing that those interested in subscribing would be a fairly niche market. Little did we know then that on the horizon lied the total transformation of the entertainment industry. And since COVID expedited this crossing into new territory, what we now witness is the war for dominance over the future of the industry. What we saw on our personal screens and devices, the vessels for this dawning of a new age last Thursday, was the introduction of Disney's Army, a celebratory parade of their merged and acquired troops as they march off to war and into Iger's sunset. The Chapek era is here. Some juicy stuff.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Where do we start the discussion here, Jeremy?
Yeah.
And we walked into another 5 hours of this show. No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah,
just like this year has been so much, and it's like been so complicated from everything around it, from politics to economics and everything else. And then when you finally get to entertainment, and when you have Warner Brothers and mostly AT&T making the desperate decision to move all of its content away from theaters and onto HBO Max, I mean, it's same day, but still putting it on a streaming service. Just everything getting moved to streaming. Things, movies that were supposed to come out a year ago are now coming out a year from now. Everything's crazy. Everything's, upside down. And to have this all happening, well, at least for Disney, they're also transitioning between different administrations of executive officer is just fascinating. It's not like a big economic issue led to Iger taking over for Eisner. And just who knows what that future is going to look like. And they announced a lot of impressive things. Ultimately, Disney's going to outspend everyone else. They're going to outspend Comcast and Universal. They're going to outspend AT&T and Warner. And when it comes to that, Disney might not be as big as they are because they have telecom companies in the background with, all of their billions of dollars. But Disney still has that creative powerhouse and engine that these other companies just don't have. Yes, we can have our complaints about whether this content is relevant or whether it is, actually pushing boundaries and telling, aspiring stories or things that we want to grab onto. But ultimately, Disney is going to spend more money. They are going to continue to roll out content despite any failures, despite anything that gets in their way. But when that content is being announced to be as exciting as the content that was announced from the Investors Day panel, there's a lot of hope that Disney is leading the pack and moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
I think Warner Brothers and HBO Max was hoping to steal the conversation by saying, look at all of our shiny toys that will be available next year throughout 2021. but that's just not enough. Just saying that, once every 2 months we'll have a big movie that'll come out. In the future, that's not enough when Netflix and Disney are spending you out double or triple or fourfold, fold. It's like they're spending so much money at this point. Again, $8 to $9 billion in the next 3 years, is absurd. Even for even for Hollywood, that's a lot of money being spent. And it really comes down to the quality that needs to be delivered in order to keep people subscribed continually. You have this idea of churn, which is used often when it comes to streaming. It's the idea that I subscribe to HBO Max just to watch Wonder Woman 1984, and then I unsubscribe as soon as I'm done watching that. That's churn. I only subscribe to a service for a certain period of time because I want to watch this one show. Okay, and there's a new season of Mandalorian, so I subscribe to Disney Plus. That season's over, and I canceled my subscription.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wait for the next interesting thing that comes my way. Well, that's not what makes Netflix all its money. Netflix makes money for you've subscribed to them for the last 3 years, and you've been paying every single month consistently. That's how Netflix makes its money. That's how they've made more money than anyone else in the entire industry, and it's why everybody's building a streaming service now. Because they see the money that Netflix makes, and they see the danger that poses to the rest of the industry, and they know that they have to begin to transfer over. And Disney has been leading it. Again, they announced Disney Plus before most other streaming services were announced from these other companies. But when Disney did that, then everyone else felt like it was okay to do so. It's like, we're gonna hop on that train too. And Disney's leading just as it was before. Yes, this past year in terms of Disney Plus, that it's been a little bit sparse in terms of the content, and some of that really comes from the upfront cost of building that service and how prohibitive that was, and the money they were losing by making that streaming service. But at this point, they can't hold back. They have to make as much as possible and get you to stay on board. Every week there will be a new piece of Disney content on Disney Plus for the next 3 years. Every week there will be something new to see and talk about. And that's pretty compelling when you look at Netflix or HBO, where you'll go for weeks without that, or the next show that comes around might not be compelling to you. And of course that's going to exist, but when you have Marvel and Star Wars shows that are going to be back to back and continuing forward, it's as soon as Mandalorian ends, it's a few weeks before WandaVision begins. That continual flow of content is going to keep you subscribed, especially if you are interested in Star Wars or Marvel and you feel like, I need to watch every Marvel show. I need to watch every Marvel movie. Well, now you have to stay subscribed. You got to keep going. That's not for Netflix, where they might be spending a lot of money, but at the same time, half the content they make is pretty much garbage. It's the stuff where you're looking things up and you've watched all the good content, and now you're just looking through all the stuff that's below 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, and you're just like, I just need something.
Yeah.
And that's okay for Netflix, but that's not okay for Disney when Disney needs to overtake Netflix. Disney needs to be dominant in the market if it's going to continue to rule. Disney has dominated the theatrical market for over a decade now. Ever since Iger came in and kind of revolutionized Disney by buying Star Wars and buying Marvel and buying Pixar, Disney has dominated. They've dominated the conversation. Warner Brothers and Universal have been trying to catch up now for years, and sometimes they make some really compelling content and they overtake Disney, but ultimately Disney's going to have something new the next month that's going to steal the thunder.
Jeremy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I saw myself come on, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go. Yeah, all excellent points. Absolutely excellent points. I think Disney will win the direct-to-consumer war. I just want to add, though, I don't think this is something to celebrate. I am very my cynical attitude toward this time in terms of the future of filmmaking is that I don't, as much as I love Disney, and as I know as much as it's easy for us Disney fans to support Disney and no matter what, this is a victory I think we should be openly critical of. I don't believe in monopolizing any industry, let alone any industry that has to do with the arts. You don't want one parent company dictating what type of stuff should be made if it doesn't fit the brand image, even if they have other brands that they separate from, Disney Plus. I don't think this is something to be celebrated. I don't think we should celebrate it if Viacom does it. I don't believe we should celebrate it if Comcast does it. I don't believe we should celebrate it if Amazon does it. I don't think Netflix is going to do it. They don't buy other companies. Their subsidiaries are all homemade. And as much as they churn out a lot of their films, they're also doing Mank. They did The Irishman last year, which say what you want about The Irishman. They do a lot of but then they get the filmmakers to make like the film of the year, like one of the big films of the year, not in terms of blockbuster, but in terms of what, that's a Martin Scorsese movie. This is a David Fincher movie. That's Netflix. They've decided that their strategy is to be a production company and not fall into not necessarily trap, but not go down the other path of becoming a multinational media conglomerate, which is what all of these other production companies have turned into over the years. Now, maybe Netflix will be forced to go down that path in the same way that Disney was forced to go down that path in the 80s. But I'm not rooting for any one of these companies to assert its dominance on the future of the industry. Because what'll happen is Disney saying, Barry Jenkins, you're an excellent filmmaker. You've done some really wonderful, thought-provoking films. Do you want to do a Lion King prequel? It's like, there's a disconnect there, and you don't want one company asserting dominance on the industry. That is my fear for this time. It's different than it's similar to the Gilded Age in the sense that it's literally the same as the Gilded Age on a much higher scale. You don't understand how massive these companies are. Massive. Huge. I will say, though, what Disney has going for it, another reason I think it'll win is the fact that there isn't a parent company above it. So with Viacom CBS, you have AT&T above it, right? So ultimately, what their decisions are as the media conglomerate, the other conglomerate, AT&T, has to, control that. It's the same with Warner. Above that is something called National Amusements. What is that? I don't know, but they're making a lot of money. They're one of the biggest conglomerates in the world, right? So Comcast is like Disney, and then I believe there's nothing above it as well, but they had a lot of momentum. They lost that momentum, and they haven't fully recovered ever since Disney beat them in the Fox merger. So Comcast, I think, is still recovering from that because, like Disney, they were relying on that to be the key to assert their dominance over the future of digital media. And I think just probably most content in general, aside from live performance, which Disney has its hand in significantly as well. That's a whole other conversation. I keep your eye on Comcast though. They are vicious.
Oh yeah.
Vicious. So is Disney though. That's but they're vicious. They stumbled with the Fox deal. They didn't get it. They stumbled with Peacock. It's not the Disney Plus that they thought it was going to be, but Comcast has the potential content. They have Universal. They have popular theme parks. At this point, as popular as Disney theme parks. Yeah, they have the legacy of NBC. They have, and they own a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Viacom is sort of in the same boat, right? They have content. They own content that has potential to stick. They own Nickelodeon. They own a whole lot of other stuff as well. So Disney, at the end of the day, Disney will win this for exactly the points that you said. Iger was smart. He jumped on the content that he knew was gonna have a lasting emotional appeal with people. He was a master at curating that content in the way that he did. I mean, it puts so much new perspective. It really does feel like this feels like, as of last week, a different Disney.
Yeah.
It's Chapek's era. It's arrived. It's here. This feels like a different Disney. In the same, and it came so much faster than with Iger, right? There's a specific feeling you have when you say Eisner, Michael Eisner. There's that era of Disney that has its own feel. It takes about a good 5 years of Iger before, okay, this feels different. This feels different. This feels like a new Disney. But that was a slow build, and it was going to continue to be a slow build, right, to this transition, to this point, this point of almost total transformation of how we take in, how we produce, and how we distribute films and television. But because of 2020, like you're saying, Freddy, boom, it happened with the snap of a finger. And so here we are, and it feels very like, whoa, I mean, it's still Disney, but I don't recognize it at all. And I'm certainly not going to cheer if they monopolize the film industry.
Mm.
It does feel like a sonic boom, like it just hits you all of a sudden. And that's what that entire Investor Day panel felt like. It was, somebody had this meme of, it was like Disney standing over the grave of like Warner Brothers and like, taking a picture and like, hey, look at this.
It's not over.
It's not over. But again, for me, it comes back to $8 to $9 billion. That's more money than anyone else is willing to spend. Even Comcast, as much as like these big, conglomerates are willing to spend money, they're only willing to invest so much. And I think that's one thing that I want to comment on is like, yes, you have these big companies that they own their little tiny Hollywood company, they own their little Warner Brothers or their little Universal, and they love it, but ultimately they're much bigger. They have a lot more things that they're worrying about than just that. Where Disney, all they have to worry about is their films and their theme parks. So when it comes to Disney, that's their main focus. That's what they're pouring all of their passion, all their money into. Is like, we have to get this to be successful. If it's not successful, then we as a company will die. That's how they feel. That might not necessarily be the case. Disney is at a point now where I even thought during the pandemic, with the pandemic and the Fox deal taking in as much debt as they did, I expected that was actually going to threaten the future investment of the company. And it turns out Disney is too big to fail. It can keep on rolling despite that. And going back to the Fox deal, something I realized, when you were talking about how they took that away, the reason Disney bought Fox wasn't just because of adult content and because they put The Simpsons on Disney Plus or they got the X-Men rights. That wasn't the reason. It was taking it away from merging with Warner Brothers or merging with Universal. That to have another company gain that content was a threat. The same way Disney felt threatened when Harry Potter, Wizarding World opened in the theme parks. All of a sudden, Iger looked and realized we are not the dominant ones in the industry. We're building Avengers campuses everywhere. We're building frozen lands everywhere. We're frozen campuses, Star Wars campuses.
That sounds. That's I don't want to know what happens on these campuses.
Yeah. No, you don't. But again, it's the reason they're building everywhere and they're pushing things. And yes, there's a pause on the construction when it comes to theme parks and the investment in theme parks, and there's the layoffs that are taking place. But when Disney's spending $8 to $9 billion in the streaming world on content, and when they see, wait a second, we can make all this money. Also, okay, you've been watching all this stuff on Disney Plus. Well, now come to the theme park where we have a location where you can also meet these characters and things can happen. I don't think that things are over for any part of Disney, that they're just going to keep growing. I don't think it's going to stop anywhere. And that's one of those things is like, you're talking about, Disney being a monopoly. They have ruled the conversation for a decade and they're still looking, they're poised to rule the next decade as well. Netflix doesn't own a theme park. Netflix doesn't, they distribute their own content and they make it, but they're not also controlling everything else around those products. It's not like a complete in-house enterprise. And for some creators, for some people, some movie directors and producers, that is an ideal situation. For some actors, they go to Disney because they know I can hop on a franchise and I know I'll have a steady gig for the next 10 years. I can be part of the MCU and I know I'll have a steady job. I know I'll have pay. I'll be part of the Disney family and all the benefits that imply. Even if your character gets killed off in the MCU, you still might end up being in a Pixar movie. It's the whole thing that, things will continue and Disney will continue to be a powerhouse in the industry. The only caveat that prevents that from being terrifying to me, the only thing is that some of the stuff they're doing with Disney animation and some of the stories and the characters that they're bringing to life have a lot of meaning and are actually doing good things in terms of representation and pushing the envelope of Hollywood. Bringing more people to the table. I had a conversation recently with my friend Jalen on his podcast, and it's all about how these billion-dollar movies don't happen unless everybody comes to the theater to watch it. These streaming services don't succeed unless everyone is subscribing to them, not just one part of the demographic. They need to be a home where everyone can see themselves represented. They can see the content that they love. And that's what Disney's been striving to do, and they're finally reaching that. I think it's interesting talking about, is this, the beginning of the Chapek era, and where there was that sort of steady build and that change from Eisner to Iger. I feel like this is a continuation of what they've been doing. It is just fast forwarded by like 5 years. It's like, this is where Disney would be in 5 years, but all of a sudden it's now. But I don't think that's because of Chapek. Again, I think Iger is setting Chapek up for that success, and yes, his name will be slapped down on this era. But ultimately, it's Iger ruling the conversation. Again, he created a position above the CEO as the chairman, just so he could rule over the creative empire that is Disney without dealing with the finances, without having to deal with any problems. It's like, I don't have to deal with all of that stuff. You get to deal with it, Chapek. And if that holds, if Jennifer Lee and Kevin Feige get to do what they're doing, if Pete Docter gets to continue to rule Pixar and run how that creative enterprise continues, then things will be fine. They'll continue to push the envelope. They'll actually be able to, as artists, to tell interesting stories, to do interesting things as artists. But if Chapek decides that I'm going to cut the budget of that, if I'm going to come in here and I'm going to decide that doesn't sound like a good marketable concept, then you won't get a film like Turning Red. That doesn't sound like something that's going to be popular with the kids these days, so I'm going to make that decision as the executive. But if he leaves the artists to do what they're doing and to continue to be successful, and he doesn't step in unless it's a desperate situation, then I think Disney will continue to be fine. And yes, they built up this amazing, this amazing empire, terrifying as you can call it. It will continue to benefit us, the consumer, as long as it's doing something good and it's bringing good into the world. But the moment that it starts to be generic and no longer explore and feels like it's just crushing creative people, then it's a big problem. And it's teetering on a knife's edge here. I feel like as much as there are benefits, the potential of the negatives is right there as well. And there is the problem of it ruling the conversation of the streaming wars, right now. And it's going to it's going to lead the streaming wars, and we'll see how long that is before the other studios maybe end up getting that investment. They maybe get that money. They end up spending $8 to $9 billion a year. That could happen. I don't believe it will, but it could happen.
Yeah, we're going to wrap up in a second, but I just want to respond really fast because we've been going. I just want to wrap up. I know I could talk about this for hours. I'm just going to wrap up a little bit. To your point, at this point, I view the individual studios as their own entity. Obviously, they're influenced by Disney, but I really feel that it's important to view Disney at this point as a parent company, just like AT&T, just like Viacom, just like Warner Media, and try to lean towards abandoning the notion that they are the Disney we know because they uphold that brand image. So the Disney we know is in Disney Animation Studios, right? It's not in Disney, this parent company, because of just the amount of restructuring that's gone on. So it's important to look and identify where where that soul genuinely is, as opposed to just thinking it's the parent company itself. That being said, doesn't matter if Pete Docter's allowed to make the movies he wants to make. No one company should own the majority of an industry at all, period. It will squash filmmakers, other filmmakers. It will make it harder for new filmmakers to make the movies that they want to make and have it be seen by more people. It will, especially when you're dealing with a company that really cares deeply about how they are viewed, their brand image. I am concerned about that. Pixar might do some incredible work this next decade, but what about a smaller animation studio who we don't know will be just as inventive as Disney was in the 20s and the 30s? They won't be allowed to explore. They'll have to work for a company that's owned by a company that's owned by a company that's owned by a company. I think that is wrong. I think that affects the consumer in negatives way. Not necessarily, and I hate using the word consumer. Who's the consumer? You are. I am. Matt. Everyone is a consumer. Consumers are people, right? We're human beings. We're not numbers. Where we have contradictions. We like one thing the next day, we don't like it the other day. We don't understand why one movie moves us and another disgusts us. We don't. No marketing research will ever be able to figure that out. The only thing that does understand that, the only thing that does figure that out, is when you have a system in place in which people are free to explore those ideas, to explore what they have to say, and have it be seen. So this squashes accessibility, even if it doesn't feel that way, because of consumer convenience. I love Disney to death, but I do not support them becoming a monopoly, even if they curate wonderful work that I enjoy. I know at the end of the day, it's going to squash the future Walt Disney, the future Mark Davis, the future Mary Blair from being able to make their own work and have their own collaborations that speak to and carry forward what it means to be a human being in the 21st century. And that's our show for today. No, okay. But that's what I have to say about that. I do agree with you, Freddy, though. I think if you're speaking in the terms of the company will be fine.
Yeah.
As long as they don't become stale. I spoke last week with Matt about how the more and more they expand, it's going to be harder for them to uphold the Disney brand image as a holistic and unifying force with all of the content that they own. So that's going to be the interesting thing to mark in the next 10 years. So
it almost felt like it was kind of
zealous
reaching
there, but
it almost felt like it was kind of reaching that bubble, and then all of a sudden with the investor thing, it feels like that bubble burst and then it grew even bigger.
Right.
It was like
exactly.
Oh wow, there's a lot more here. And I think you're right there though. And I'm just commenting real quick on the whole thing. I think you're right that they are not the Disney that we remember. You could even see that from going to D23. It's all Disney specific, and then all of a sudden Marvel, Star Wars, National Geographic, History Channel, it's all here. Simpsons, Family Guy. Why is Family Guy at D23? I don't know.
Right. I agree.
Welcome to Disney, folks. It's a grand old time.
Yeah. Well, lots of great points made in this week's discussion, and we do have voicemails, and I apologize. We'll get to those voicemails next episode. We have 3 voicemails here, actually, from Mark, Mike, and Josh. So, unfortunately, we have run out of time here on the episode, but we will get to those voicemails first thing next week, next episode. But I guess
don't worry, because this conversation is we're going to be talking about this for many years to come. Yes. So if you thought today was interesting, just wait till next week. Well, it might be a slow news week next week. Just wait till next month.
Yes. Well, on that note, thank you all for coming out to today's episode of Matterhorn Mondays. Of course, all the links to all the articles we refer to will be in the description below, as well as links to Freddy's Twitter and his podcast, Imagine Tomorrow, will be linked down in the description as well. Go check out Freddy's podcast. Great stuff that Freddy's doing. And, of course, Jeremy's Twitter will be linked down below. And, of course, mine will be there, too, if you guys are interested. But, question of the week. Form will be down in the description as well for you guys to submit your questions for next week's episode. And we already have a pretty great backlog of questions that we've just gotten from the beginning of the episode. So we're excited to see how you guys expand on that. And I guess we should specify Disney questions, not necessarily what my favorite cereal is. That was one of the questions that someone put in there. Maybe we'll answer it, but I don't think people would necessarily find my favorite cereal to be interesting. So let's try and keep those questions Disney related. And yeah, you guys have anything you'd like to add on before we close off here?
Just, definitely check out the podcast, and I'm really excited for January. We're going to be talking about Avengers Campus with this whole Marvel theme park universe, sort of, branching off in this different direction. I'm having all sorts of different guests on, and I'm really excited to sort of have that Avengers moment of all of us different creators and people from across this Twitter coming together just to celebrate what Marvel means to us and what it can be, and also what has been achieved in the parks and what is going to be achieved. I just can't wait to see what Avengers Campus ends up being. Who knows when Disneyland's going to open, but when that happens, there you go.
Yes, like I said, link will be down in the description. Very exciting stuff coming from Freddy. But yeah, that's the show, everybody. Thank you all for coming out to today's episode. And again, 575-386-5814 if you'd like to call in. Leave your thoughts on any of the topics that we discussed today. But I think that's going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you all for coming to today's episode, and as always, have a great big beautiful tomorrow.